Alright, welcome to my first solo video for uploading onto BitChute and that other one, YouTube I think it's called. So on my Subscribe channel, I asked for people to ask questions and I would answer them. And so I got about 20 questions and finally I'm feeling up for answering them. Because this winter I've been having low batteries, so I've been feeling kind of run down. But I'm feeling up for it tonight. So, first question. There's like a whole slew of questions from somebody called MYWLAM. I don't know how to pronounce it. But the first question is, why is breath meditation so often taught in a way that is entirely inconsistent with the Anapanasati Sutta? It is almost as if some of the techniques taught have nothing whatsoever to do with the Anapanasati Sutta. So the Anapanasati Sutta is a discourse in the Pali texts giving instructions on how to do meditation on the breath. It's the discourse on mindfulness of breathing. And it is true that a lot of the famous meditation techniques do not adhere strictly to the instructions given in that sutta. For example, some meditation techniques have people essentially hyperventilating. It's like they're doing holotropic breath work or something, like Stan Grof would call it, despite the fact that the sutta says that you should be calming your body instead of hyperventilating. And then of course the Mahasi method has people focusing on their belly, like their diaphragm or their abdomen as it gets bigger and smaller when they're breathing, instead of being mindful of the sensation of touch at the nose. But really, I mean, it's not absolutely necessary to adhere strictly to the Anapanasati Sutta. So long as it works, I mean, that's really the main thing. So long as it works. So if being mindful of your abdomen going in and out works as well, or maybe even better for some people than being mindful of the touch of air at your nostrils, then you might as well go for it. Although the hyperventilating part I'm kind of skeptical of. But really, I mean, it's the usefulness of it that is more important than how strictly it adheres to the Pali texts. So if it works, go with it. And for example, the Mahasi method, the Mahasi belly meditation, does get people at least to an intermediate level of meditation, so it's not all bad. Okay, next question. What is meant in the Anapanasati Sutta by establishing mindfulness before oneself? That's actually a good question. Not that any of the other ones are bad ones, but that is a good question. And it's also in the Satipatthana Sutta. It says you should establish mindfulness before yourself. And you got these different theories of people taking it literally, like they're saying, oh, it means that you should establish your mindfulness right at the end of your nose, or right at the third eye between your eyebrows or something. But I think establishing anything before yourself is like a figure of speech in ancient Indian languages, like Pali. Like in the Sutta Nipata, I don't remember the word, but there's a word meaning to set something before you, to set something in front. And that means to prefer that or to favor that. And I assume that's what it means here. It's like with regard to establishing mindfulness before yourself, is you're just putting mindfulness in front. You're setting that foremost. That's the most important thing. That's what you're attending to. So I assume it's just a figure of speech, that you're just making mindfulness your priority. Okay, next question. Do you teach meditation, or do you think it is somewhat irrelevant, as do some well-known scholar monks? Well, I don't think that meditation is irrelevant. I think it's very important. And I have given guidance to people with regard to meditation. So I do teach meditation, although I mean, it's like one size does not fit all. Like there are meditation instructors, like in the Mahasi tradition, where they just teach the same meditation method to every single person who comes there. And it's like a doctor who gives the same medicine to every patient. And if the patient doesn't get better, the patient gets scolded for not being sick properly or some such. So, yeah, it's like different meditation techniques work better for different people. So a good meditation instructor would have more than just one medicine to hand out. So anyway, the question is, yes, I do teach meditation sometimes under certain circumstances, and I do not think it is irrelevant. Next question. Do you think meditation is the best way to stimulate opioid release? Or do you think other methods or substances are better, especially as they are easier and faster acting? Well, I mean, if that's your purpose, is to stimulate opioid release, then I suppose the thing to do would be to, I don't know, take opioids or take some kind of drug that would cause opioid release. There are people that meditate as a substitute for narcotics, but that's really not the purpose of meditation. So yeah, there are ways of releasing opioids. That would be like endorphins or something, right? Yeah, there are better ways of doing that, and certain drugs would do it. But yeah, it's like the purpose of meditation is to be more awake and not to be narcotized. So yeah, or even to experience euphoria. I mean, the purpose of meditation isn't euphoria either. Next question. What is the likelihood that the Anapanasati instructions come from the Buddha? Are there any meditation instructions that can definitely be said to be from the Buddha? Oh, that depends on who you talk to. I'm very skeptical, and so my answer would be very different from, say, an Asian traditionalist conservative monk who just believes all of it. You know, it'd be like asking a medieval Christian, what parts of the Bible do you think are true? I mean, they just say all of it. With regard to me, there's no absolute guarantees with regard to anything. So the likelihood that the Anapanasati instructions come from the Buddha, yeah, I don't really know. I really can't say. With regard to meditation instructions that can definitely be said to be from the Buddha, well, almost certainly, at the very least, he would be encouraging mindfulness all the time. You know, like the repeated admonishments that, you know, when a monk stretches forth his arm, he does it mindfully. When he pulls his arm back in, he does it mindfully. When he turns his head mindfully. Just all postures, you know, when you're eating, when you're lying down to sleep. Just everything that you do, you should do that mindfully. With regard to actually sitting cross-legged with your eyes closed, what instructions he gave. I assume he would be teaching something like jhana for some monks, which we'll get to directly because there are some questions about jhana coming right up. In fact, the next one. So, I think I'll just go to the next question. What is your view of the jhanas, important or irrelevant? This is kind of a trick question because the description of the 4 jhanas in the texts is almost invariably just this formula that's just repeated verbatim every single place that it's mentioned, and the formula is not descriptive and exact and precise enough that the definition of the jhanas is uncontroversial. So the definition of the jhanas is almost worthless because it's not so clear cut that everyone agrees on what it means. So personally, I think that jhana originally just meant meditation, and that the 4 jhanas were originally 4 stages of meditation. Like first jhana, you're still thinking. So that would be like even what the Christian contemplatives would call meditation, where you still have like an object that you're concentrating on. You know, it could be whatever, the breath or like a mantra or something like that. So long as you're labeling, I mean, so long as you're still thinking. And then second jhana and third jhana and fourth jhana, you're gradually making your mind more and more subtle. So it's just the different stages of getting to fourth jhana in which your mind is just completely still and clear and peaceful, and there's no mental states, no discrete mental states going on at all. Your mind is just like, I don't want to say blank, but it's like a mirror or it's like glass. That would be like fourth jhana. And it's just the different stages of meditation. It's like one stage is your thinking, the next stage is, I think it's your mental feelings, like your emotional feelings fade out, but you still have physical feelings. And then in the next stage above that, even the physical feelings fade out, and then it's like eventually you're just completely clear. No distinct mental states going on. So let's see, where is the question here? Is it important or irrelevant? Yeah, it's very important because traditionally, and I think this is kind of the way it is, it's like the purpose of meditation is to make your mind as clear and awake and also as simple and still as possible all at the same time. So if it's simple and still but you're not awake, then you're just unconscious. But if you're awake and your mind isn't simple and still, then you can be just all agitated, like if you drank too much coffee or something. So the point is to get your mind as awake as possible and to be thinking as little as possible, because the whole purpose of meditation, I mean, ultimately, not just as a stress relief or a substitute for narcotics or whatever, is to penetrate samsara and experience ultimate reality. So you're trying to see through the shadows flickering on the walls of Plato's cave, and it's easier to do that if you've stilled the shadows so that there aren't any shadows. It's easier for you to see through the illusion if you're not being distracted by the illusion, because you've got the illusion so simplified that it's just devoid of content. And then you can see through that more easily, and you have the flash of insight, or liberating insight, I should say. So, yeah, it's important, and the jhanas, based on my own understanding, is originally probably just 4 levels of meditation, with fourth jhana being the highest one. Next question, what is absorption? Well, that's what jhana is often translated as into English, is absorption. So it would be like a contemplative state, an advanced contemplative state, especially the higher jhanas. The first jhana I do not consider to be a superhuman mental state, but apparently scholar monks who didn't meditate much really didn't know how to interpret it, and they've got these strange interpretations where all 4 jhanas, any of the 4 jhanas, are considered to be Udari Manusa Dhamma, or superhuman mental states. And even in the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, just right concentration is defined as the 4 jhanas. So, I mean, if you can take all that seriously, then right concentration would be a superhuman mental state, which I personally kind of doubt. So I'm not sure if I actually answered that one very well, but next question. According to the Visuddhimagga, only 1 in 1 million can reach absorption. Do you agree with this? And given the odds, do you think there is a better way for someone to spend their time? If you're able to reach absorption, let's say you're able to get into an advanced jhana state, then yeah, you should go for it, because the odds of you becoming enlightened are much greater the more just awake and simple you can get your mind. And like 4th jhana is just maximum awake and simple. So if you can do that, that's great. You should definitely do that. But it could be true that only 1 in a million approximately can reach like 4th jhana, or like a really advanced, like what the Catholics would call high contemplation. But I mean, if you're able to do it, then you should do it. But if you keep trying and trying and trying and you can't, then yeah, maybe you should stop beating your head against the brick wall and try something that actually does work for you. And there's one statement by St. John of the Cross, who was a meditation master. I think he was a master of 4th jhana, even though he was a Christian. There's this one part where in one of his books, I think it's The Ascent of Mount Carmel, where he says that if you get contemplation and then lose it and then get it and lose it and get it and lose it, kind of like Gaudika in the Pali texts, where he would get jhana and then lose it and get it again and then lose it again. According to St. John of the Cross, then it's just God has other plans for you, that you're just not intended or cut out to be an adept at contemplation. And unfortunately for me, that's more or less the situation I found myself in, where my samadhi or my concentration would come and go and come and go and come and go. So, next question: what is karma? That's a good question too, and it's one that I get a lot. Even like on Sundays, little Burmese kids will ask me questions, and that's like a common one that I get is, what is karma? And essentially what karma is, I mean, just going with the suttas at first, according to the suttas, karma is cetana, which is volition. You know, there's a famous statement, Chidanaham bhikkhave kamam mudami, which means, monks, I say, karma is volition. And so, volition isn't necessarily the best interpretation or the best translation of cetana. It could be something more like will, like Schopenhauer's will. And that really is kind of a nice analogy for people familiar with Western philosophy, because according to Schopenhauer, will is just this force that just craves its own existence, craves its self-perpetuation, and it's just the force that drives us all through life, and that's pretty much what karma is too. So karma is like the motive force of your mind, of your mental states. Not just your consciousness, but the flow of mental states is your karma. And if you're not awake enough, and most of us aren't, then that is also just the force of habit that drives you through life and makes your decisions for you and just has you just sort of going through the motions like a meat puppet. That's karma also. But everything that you do, every decision that you make, every volitional act, it changes the flow a little bit. It reinforces it or moves it slightly in a different direction. And so, good karma is leading you towards, higher consciousness and fewer desires and, simplicity and clarity, that sort of thing. And bad karma is just what takes you farther away from that. So with regard to what is karma, karma is like will. It's just the motive. It's like the momentum of your mental states. Next question. How can there be karma if there is no self? That's kind of a trick question because in a way, I mean, especially if you're going totally radical like the Mahayana Buddhists, I mean, if there's no self, there's no anything really. Nothing distinct and discrete that has any kind of self-existence. But with regard to the Theravadan approach, karma is just, I mean, it's sort of like a flame, it's just, it's different from one moment to the next. It's like a process, it's a flow. It's just energetic. It's not just this substance or a thing. And so it just exists on its own. And when the conditions that cause that karma to exist cease to exist, then the karma itself ceases to exist. So it's sort of like a flame where anyone who's a Boy Scout knows the fire triangle. You got to have heat, fuel, and oxygen. And so long as those conditions are there, the fire will be there. And it's sort of the way karma works too. If you've got the conditions, then it's going to be there. And it's not a self, partly because we don't really control it. I mean, going with the Anapanasati Sutta, you can't say, let it be this way, let it not be that way, and have it happen, which is a sign of no self. But also, it isn't a self because it doesn't have its own self-existence. It's not an absolute existence. It just exists because other things exist that cause it to exist. So, it doesn't. It's not like a soul that just exists like distinctly, regardless of everything else in the universe. Okay, next question. Do you see Theravada Buddhism changing in order to accommodate Western culture? For example, Ajahn Sona at Birkin is now doing online retreats and offers online Upasaka training. Likewise, Ajahn Yuta Dhammo, who has an online presence via Siri Mangalo and who has an online calendar where you can book meditation sessions with him. He also offers a series of at-home retreats that culminate in becoming a teacher. Okay, so the first line is the question. Do you see Theravada Buddhism changing in order to accommodate Western culture? And yeah, it's already happening. I mean, it just has to happen. You've got two kinds of, or maybe three kinds of Theravada in America now. First, you've got ethnic Theravada, which is still practicing traditional Asian Buddhism as well as you can in America. And the Americans don't have much to do with that. Then there's like Western monastic Buddhism, which is trying to follow the rules more or less, although even they aren't following the rules very strictly, like wearing the snowsuits and the Arctic expedition gear and all that, even if it's not very cold. Or, I mean, just money. I mean, it's almost impossible. It's virtually impossible to follow the rules of monastic discipline strictly in the West, especially with regard to money and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that Theravada Buddhism is going to have to change, and there's a good chance that what it's going to change into isn't Theravada anymore, and people should just be honest about that. Like the third kind of Buddhism that I didn't get to is like the elite Buddhism, which is like the left-wing social justice Buddhism, where they're talking more about white guilt and gay rights and climate change and all that, more than they're talking about Gautama Buddha. So I mean that can hardly even be called Theravada Buddhism anymore. It's something else. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with Buddhism changing into something other than Theravada in the West, because Theravada literally was designed to fit the ancient Ganges Valley in like the 5th century BC, and all the rules of monastic discipline especially are geared right for this Iron Age Indian culture that just does not fit America. So yeah, there's going to have to be changes made, and there could be still strictly practicing monks, but they're going to be definitely a very small minority, and regular people that want to practice Theravada or just like some kind of legit form of Buddhism. Yeah, I mean, you have no choice but to accommodate Western culture to some degree. I mean, you carry around Western culture in your own head. You know, even if you outwardly imitate like an Iron Age Indian ascetic of the Ganges Valley, still you're going to be remembering, you know, like rock and roll and all this stuff that didn't exist back then. You're still going to think like a modern Western person. So yeah, that is the big question. It has to change, and it is changing, whether we want it to or not. And the main point is just try to save the main essence of it, while at the same time making the necessary changes that it will fit Western culture and won't just be this weird tropical potted plant that has to be kept in a special protected greenhouse environment with people coming and taking care of it instead of just living naturally outdoors. So yeah, that is the big question. So I answered that question kind of with another question. Next question. Do you see a time in the West when those that support Theravada Buddhism will somehow be integrated into the Sangha and not be left as estranged outsiders? Mahayana Buddhism has many different ways of integrating lay people into their organizations. Upasaka training courses and teacher training courses illustrate a somewhat changing relationship already, it could be argued. So the question seems to be, will there be a time when lay people are integrated into the Sangha? And that's really not the way Buddhism started. You know, like original Buddhism, the actual Buddhists were the ascetics living out in the forest, and the lay people were just like the fans supporting their favorite team. Buddhism was like a spectator sport. So if you really wanted to be a serious Buddhist, then you renounce the world and go forth into the homeless life. And in the West, people don't like that because it's in the West, people don't like class stratification and like people at a higher level than them, and like bowing to monks and that sort of thing is it meets with a fair amount of resistance in the West. So with lay people being integrated into the Sangha, it's the best I can do would be like a compromise. The best I could think of would be a compromise where you have sort of like quasi monks. You've got lay people living a simple life, maybe in some relative poverty, maybe wearing like a simple kind of uniform. I don't know what it'd be, army surplus or gray sweats or something. And so there'd be like a compromise, just sort of like an intermediate state between a monk, which doesn't really fit Western culture if he's following the rules correctly, and just like a completely, no holds barred layperson with everything optional. So, yeah, I mean, there could be some kind of system set up. I was calling it Vada for a while. It's like, it's not Terra, which is the doctrine of the elders. It would be Vada, the doctrine of the newcomers, because that's essentially us. We are the newcomers. And so you'd need wise people, or one wise person at least, to come up with like a really a valid system that really does reflect the teachings of Buddha, while at the same time maybe allowing people to handle a little bit of money, for example, feed themselves, that kind of thing. But it is tricky. I mean, if you really want to practice Buddhism very strictly according to the ancient texts, then your best bet is to go to some place like Burma and head for the forest. Okay, next question. What were the top 3 cave experiences I had? Yeah, that's top 3 cave experiences. I'm not exactly sure what the questioner would consider to be a top cave experience. I don't know if you want some kind of like uproar and excitement, or ghosts and witchcraft, or just deep meditative states. But I guess I'll just answer the first 2 top cave experiences would just be like insightful ones that really stood out because they kind of helped me in my spiritual practice. And both of them happened in the main cave where I lived. In fact, it's the main place where I've lived. It's the one place I've lived longer than any other place in my life, as far as I know. It was called Tabo Guha, which was in northwestern Burma. It was a very deluxe cave. It went about 50 feet into the side of this hill with this corridor for walking meditation. It had like 4 rooms, little storage rooms and everything. It was really nice. But upper Burma gets just blazing hot. And sometimes even the monsoon season is just a bust and there's hardly any rain at all. It's just semi-desert there. And there were times when just being hot all the time, not being able to stop sweating, not being able to feel comfortable, ever, for just days and days and days, it would just kind of start wearing me down. Plus there's just other stresses that add to that, just being alone, not being able to talk to anybody, and just all of the self-restraint required to be a conscientious monk. It just makes like a strain on the system. And one time it was just blazing hot, and I was just fed up, and I just essentially threw a conniption. I was just like yelling and cussing and slamming things. And while I was yelling and cussing and slamming things, there was like this click, and suddenly it was like I had like 2 minds at the same time. One mind was just going through the motions of throwing the conniption and just cussing and slamming things, but the other level of my mind, the other mind or whatever, was just watching that, just not getting involved at all, just watching. And it was like being an actor. All of a sudden, instead of just being pissed off and fed up and throwing a fit, I was like an actor playing the role of being pissed off and fed up and throwing a fit, where it's like, an actor can be like they're like playing King Lear on a stage. They're King Lear who's just going mad with grief and the storm and everything. And at the same time that they're really feeling that, they're really belting out the lines and everything. At the same time, they know where the audience is, and they know their center of gravity, their balance, and how much slobber they have in their mouth, and all that kind of stuff too. And it's like the actor stuff you have to know at the same time as you're like raging at the storm as King Lear. So it was kind of that kind of state, and it was, for me, it was really an insight that first of all that kind of consciousness is always there. Really, we just don't notice it. That's one of the reasons why you meditate, is so you can notice that better. And also just the very fact that it is possible to just throw a fit mindfully. I was telling a Burmese monk who was actually a Mahasi Sotapanna, although he realized that he wasn't one, but he was declared a Sotapanna by U Pandita himself, and he didn't believe that you can throw a fit mindfully, but I've done it more than once. Excuse me. Okay, so that was one of the top 3 cave experiences. The next one is just a similar one. It's even just seemingly more mundane. Was one thing that's absolutely necessary living in central Burma, or upper Burma, is you need a sweat rag, like this. You always got to have this. This is the absolutely necessary. If you live in central Burma, you got to have one of these. And the main reason for it, of course, is just wiping the sweat off yourself. You're just drenched in sweat all the time. Or if there's flies, you can do this kind of business, and then after you take a shower or take a bath, this is enough to dry off your body, especially if you don't have hair on your head. And it just has all kinds of purposes. You can even wipe your mouth on or whatever. It's called the Mukha Puncha in Pali, which is the mouth wiper or the face wiper. So anyway, mine had just worn out. It was just all threadbare and ragged and everything. So I was going to get a new one, and so I went into the storage room and in the deluxe cave, and had the selection narrowed down to 2 of them. There was a yellow one and an orange one, and I was just standing there trying to decide which one I was going to take, and there was no obvious reason to take one over the other, and so I was just kind of like in the quandary, like what Burden's asked, the donkey that's just like stuck between 2 piles of hay. It's like there's 2 piles of hay just exactly the same distance away from it, so it just can't decide which one to go to. It was kind of like that, and then all of a sudden it just clicked, I'll take the orange one. And I was mindful enough at the time that I realized, I was like, I didn't know that I made that decision until I just made it. It just came into my mind of its own, and so it really got me thinking about free will, how free will could work, and like you really don't know what you're going to choose until you find yourself choosing it. So you're just as surprised at your own decisions as anybody else, and most people don't notice that because usually there's an obvious reason for choosing one way or the other, and so you just choose the obvious reason. But if you're just in this state where there's no obvious reason, you're going to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt or whatever, and there's no obvious reason to pick one over the other, and you're being mindful at the time, then you can just watch the decision process just arise, and with you just kind of observing it, not even really participating. So that's like an insight into no self and volition and karma and that sort of thing, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. So there's that. And then I guess it says, please include something with animals if possible. So so my third top 3 cave experience. I'll just tell about my very first cave experience. The very first night I spent in a cave, which was in Thailand. And it was before I got to Burma, and I went to visit a monk named Uwaithariza, who was like legendary. He was just super ascetic. He was like absolutely strict in following the rules, and he practiced all of the Dhutangas as strictly as he could. He was like a Buddhist Rambo or something. And so he was sort of set up to me as like the shining example of how I ought to be. So he was kind of like my role model. And he did me the honor of, when we went to visit him at his cave, or on the hill where his cave was, he asked me if I would like to spend the night in a cave near his cave. And so I said, sure, that's great. The other monks that were in the party just stayed in this kind of deluxe cave down below that had like linoleum on the floor and a clock on the wall and everything. It was this big fancy cave for visitors, I think. But Uwaitharis's cave, it was just like this pitch black hole, and he thought it was great, but he couldn't keep anything. He couldn't keep soap. He couldn't keep a book or anything because the rats would chew it all up. And so I was still wearing thick wool robes from America. I was just new to the tropics, and so I'm already just like wearing an oven. And he tells me that when I go into the cave, I need to cover myself from head to foot, just completely cover my entire body, otherwise the rats will bite me. And sure enough, it was nighttime. I'm like climbing down. We stayed up really late talking, and then I go down into this cave, and there's like a whiptail scorpion on the wall, and just full of mosquitoes. And sure enough, after I got down there on the floor of the cave and covered myself up, I could hear the rats coming, and they chewed up my bowl bag. They were trying to get into my bowl all night long, and they chewed up my sandals and chewed up a few other things. And that was my first night. I didn't get much sleep at all that night. It's like we didn't even get to bed until probably 2 or 3 in the morning, or I didn't. And then just mosquitoes and sweat and just rats all over me, and yeah, I don't know if that would be called of the top 3, but it definitely stands out. And it did have animals, because it was mosquitoes, rats, and a large whiptail scorpion on the wall. Probably some spiders too. Okay, next question. I have heard that the Buddha is reputed to have said that on the balance of probabilities he thought God did not exist. Is that the Buddhist view? If so, how can it be explained that the universe or cosmos is moral? One must have a moral universe cosmos, or one cannot have karma, or at least as it is generally understood. Okay, well, yeah, the Buddha and I think probably most of the samanas, the philosophers of ancient India, the ones that weren't Brahmins, they did not posit the existence of a creator God, a capital G, absolute God. There'd be lesser gods that were just beings that were higher than us. They had more power and maybe more intelligence, and they'd live longer and that sort of thing. It'd be at a finer vibration than us, but the absolute being, the deity, the capital G God, it just was not considered to exist in ancient India. And so how can it be explained that the universe is moral? Well, that's just because morality is simply a matter of improving the quality of your mind. It's like raising or lowering your vibration, or getting you closer to enlightenment or farther away from enlightenment, getting you closer to having a clear and subtle enough mind that you can penetrate to ultimate reality. So the closer you get to that, the more moral it is. So it really doesn't have anything to do with a God decreeing that this is good and this is bad. It's just whatever makes your mind clear and peaceful and simple and alert is good. Just by definition. That is the definition of good, essentially, is just what raises the vibration of your consciousness, and what is bad is what lowers the vibration of your consciousness. And generally what is good is what makes you happy in the long run, and what is bad is what makes you unhappy in the long run. But it's just the quality of your own mind through your own mental actions. It's like the moral aspect of it is just built right in. It's just whether you're happy or not. So I think I hope I answered that question. Next question. Do you believe karma exists, or do you take the view that the concept was inserted into the philosophy to give it a moral grounding, rather like Nietzsche inserted the concept of eternal recurrence in order to give his perspective a moral basis? Karma does exist because, if volition or will exists, then karma exists, because karma is volition or will. So, you can take that as you please, If you think volition or will exists, then karma exists, because that's what karma is. And it's just very ancient in Indian philosophy. It goes way, way back, long before the Buddhist time. So that's something that, I mean, to some degree, culturally and philosophically, he kind of inherited the concept, although he refined the idea to making karma essentially a mental state. That was sort of a Buddhist innovation. Because a lot of people thought karma was like a physical substance or something like that sticks to your soul. Like the Jains, I think, believe that karma is like this sticky substance that sticks to your soul and weighs it down. So you have to work off your karma so that your soul or your jiva can rise up into heaven. But with the Buddha, he just made it psychological. Next question. What path would you suggest a layperson follow if they wish to become a serious practitioner? Meditation, abhidhamma, a flow chart would be helpful. Well, if you want to be a serious practitioner, I mean, if you want to be totally serious, then you become a monk, and not even a monk in America or in some cushy, comfortable meditation center. You really become a monk and just head for the jungle or the desert, and just some wilderness, and really practice as strictly as you can. But if you want to be a serious layperson in the West, which is completely understandable, then bare minimum would be 5 precepts. Don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, don't have sensual misconduct, and don't take wine, ale, or other intoxicants which cause cloudedness of mind or heedlessness. And definitely meditate, or at least be mindful. Even if you're not sitting cross-legged, be mindful. Just walk mindfully. Do kind of walking meditation, or have like a little mantra that you can have going if you're doing just some menial repetitive task, which includes walking. You just you can meditate while doing that. Meditate while going up and down the stairs. Meditate while sitting on the toilet or brushing your teeth, or anything really. I mean, that's really, like I said earlier, that's probably the meditation advice that I would consider most likely to originate from the historical Buddha himself, is just being mindful as possible of every activity. And I think the mindfulness question is farther down. Somebody else asked that, so we'll get to that. But with regard to abhidhamma, the less you know, the better, because the less you know, the less you have to unlearn. Because abhidhamma really is, it's like an ancient commentary that got incorporated into the scriptures, but very little of it, in my opinion, originated with the Buddha. It's sort of like the Visuddhimagga or something, but it's older, so it's so old that it got included into the Pali texts, or the scriptures, the Tipitaka. And it's just kind of going in the wrong direction. It's trying to intellectualize reality. It's trying to understand reality intellectually, and you're never going to understand reality intellectually. You can get sort of a good, like a model, a paradigm that pretty much works, but that's not going to be reality. You're going to understand the patterns of the flickering shadows on Plato's cave, but you're never going to really understand what it's like outside of the cave until you just break the chains and go out. So there are other things you can do, like eat less, read less, talk less, sleep less, go barefoot a lot. You have to be more mindful if you're walking around barefoot, especially outside. And study. Try to like read translations of Pali texts, good translations, or if there's wise teachers that you trust, you can read their books or watch their videos or whatever it is. Okay, next question. What is an anagarika, and how does that differ from an upasaka? How does someone become one? An anagarika, literally anagarika means homeless one. So an anagarika would be an unordained renunciant wanderer. And they would roughly correspond to what's called a pothudo in Burmese. I'm not sure what they're called in Thailand, like a pakao or something like that. So they would be sort of like junior monk, whereas an Upasaka is a supporter, a lay supporter of monks. In addition to keeping 5 precepts and so forth, they also are supporting monks. And if you want to be a serious practitioner, I mean, that's something I should have mentioned, is really, a lot of Westerners really don't see the point, but if you cannot really, really renounce the world, then at least you're helping by, you're supporting somebody else who is giving it a shot. And that was, like I said, originally that's what Buddhist lay people were, is mainly they were just the supporters. They were like the base camp. They couldn't do it themselves, so they were going to earn merit by being generous and helping others to really go for enlightenment. And that increases the amount of enlightenment in the world also. So that's good. But I kind of backed up on that one. Let's see. So an anagarika would be like a low-level, unordained renunciant wanderer, and they usually wear white, I think, at least traditionally. And an upasaka is just a layperson who is a supporter of monks. Okay, how does one become one? I would assume, there are ceremonies and like official ways of becoming an anagarika in Burma, probably Thailand also. With regard to being an upasaka, I think all you got to do is just be a devout, believing Buddhist and support the sangha. And even an anagarika, I don't think you'd necessarily have to be declared one by a senior monk or anything like that. So next question: do you see online upasaka training becoming common in the West? Maybe. I really don't know that much about it. I'm really very much of a newcomer to Zoom Buddhism. So yeah, that one is it wouldn't surprise me. It seems like it's becoming more common now. So yeah, I'll just say yes. Next question, and this is the last one from the person whose name I can't pronounce. Do you regret returning to the West? Do you foresee a time when you may return to the wilds of Burma? No, I do not regret returning to the West. In fact, from the Buddhist point of view, regret is always bad karma. It always just makes things worse. It always takes you farther away from enlightenment overall. Even though there might be certain advantages to regret, it's like if you do something and you feel really shitty after doing it, it may, inspire you not to do it again, something like that. But overall, you can just, if you have any wisdom, you can just see that you shouldn't do it again, and just that should be good enough. You can do it without the regret. So that's something I've really taken to heart. I'm almost immune to regret. So you just you fall down, you just get up, brush yourself off, and continue moving forwards. But no, I do not regret returning to the West. I'd been wanting to return to the West for a long time, and every place has got its good points and its bad points. In some ways, Burma is far superior, especially if you want to be like a strictly practicing monk. Yeah, Burma works better because the whole culture is compatible with that. And let's see, I do not foresee a time when I may return to the wilds of Burma, because I'm just getting too old for that shit. Like what Danny Glover said in Lethal Weapon. I'm getting too old for this shit. Yeah, that's it's like I'm getting in my old age, I'm becoming less gung-ho about just radical asceticism and just pushing myself to the limit of what I'm able to stand. And also, I'm just more sensitive to extremes of weather. I was getting sick more often, that kind of thing. So it's time to take it a little easier. And I have no intention of going back to Asia, unless it's just for a visit or a vacation or something. Okay. Next question is from Dog Breath, Mr. Breath. How does Terra pannobhasa define mindfulness and enlightenment? So that's 2 questions. How do I define mindfulness? That's a good question. Really, it's just awareness. I think mindfulness is just awareness, just being undistractedly aware of something. And the highest mindfulness is you're not even undistractedly aware of something, because it's just the awareness is just kind of wide open. It becomes almost paradoxical because you've got awareness just kind of itself, because you've pretty much cleared your mind of all mental states, all discrete mental states. So the perfection of mindfulness would be just kind of a paradoxical mindfulness, like consciousness of itself or something. But as a general rule, mindfulness, which is all according to Abhidhamma that I already dissed, it's always there. I mean, you've always got some degree of mindfulness. It's just whether it's high quality or low quality mindfulness. But it's essentially just awareness. Like Tom Pulusiato, who is the founder of the tradition which I was ordained, he said Thadi is Athi, which means mindfulness is just knowledge. It's knowing, which is essentially awareness. And next question, what is enlightenment? My own interpretation of enlightenment, I will tell you later, because first I'll just give you the standard orthodox, right out of the text. Enlightenment is just the cessation of suffering, or it's the cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. The three poisons or the three fires. That would be enlightenment, or the attainment of nirvana. With my explanation of enlightenment would be penetration of the illusion to ultimate reality. It's like awareness of ultimate reality. I assume full absolute enlightenment would be you would be fully aware of ultimate reality all the time. So I mean, you'd still be in the matrix, but at least you would know that you're in the matrix. Okay, next question from Chaplin. I have it typed Chapin, but I'm pretty sure it's Chaplin. Okay, what do you view as the most helpful, timeless, masculine, and ascetic teaching of the Buddha for men living in today's postmodern West? How can these foundational teachings help create stronger, more stable men and healthier families and culture in the West? Well, that is what is needed, and if Buddhism could meet that need, it would become a lot more popular instead of emphasizing wimpiness, which is pretty much what it does nowadays. If it emphasized strength, which is what it used to do, then I think it could really maybe not go mainstream so much, but at least become much more popular than it is. So in order to make people stronger and tougher, including just having a stronger, tougher mind, which is really one of the main points of being a monk, is just cultivating toughness of mind, just so that you can endure just about anything that the universe throws at you and still maintain equanimity. That's kind of what a lot of asceticism is for. Is just it teaches you how you can be serene and happy even if your stomach is empty and you're drenched in sweat and you've got no friends and no family and no money and you're sleeping on the ground under a tree and everything, but still you can be happy. And I've learned that through my own personal experience. It is possible to be happy under circumstances like that. But the average guy living in a house with a family isn't going to be doing that much, except maybe like a forest retreat or something every once in a while. So let's see. How to have a tougher mind. I think keeping in mind, like the first two noble truths, that suffering of some sort to some degree is just inevitable. So long as you exist in this world, you're never going to have everything going your way. There's always going to be just problems and friction and everything. And the second noble truth should also be borne in mind, which is that all suffering is caused by craving and attachment. And attachment essentially means just insisting on things being a certain way. So just teaching men and women, and to some degree children, that whenever you're suffering, whenever you're unhappy, it's essentially, from a Buddhist point of view, always self-inflicted, and to some degree always unnecessary, because it's volitional. It's caused by your own refusal to accept a situation. And some situations, I have to admit, are very hard to accept, like a toothache, for example, but really it still is volitional, even though sometimes the volition may seem to be hardwired. Accepting the inevitability of death would be another way of toughening oneself up. Just reminding yourself, it's considered to be one of the great protectors in Buddhism. Just remind yourself from time to time that you really are going to die, that everything that has a beginning also has an end. But getting more towards like the more obviously tough stuff, just austerity. I mean, Buddhism really has a lot to say about just disdain for unnecessary comforts. Wallowing in luxury just makes you soft and weak and flabby. So, just a little bit of minimalism and a certain disdain for comfort, let alone luxury. I think that would be very helpful. And austerity is really, it's a way of expressing masculinity. Like in William James's classic book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, he was talking about how in the West especially, masculinity is expressed through like aggression. It's like the soldier is considered to be the most macho guy, but there is like a peaceful, non-violent way of expressing one's masculinity, and that is just through austerity and just fearlessness. Just to cultivate fearlessness is really, you can call that the divine masculine, or an aspect of the divine masculine. And that was the last question. So, and looks like we're almost an hour long. So yeah, if anybody has any more questions, then you feel free to include them in the comments on my Subscribe Star page, or in the BitChute comments, or on the comments of that other one. I think it's YouTube. So and then if enough people like it and ask questions, then I can do this again. So be happy, everybody, and I think I'm done.